And good evening. It is Monday, or Drewsday, should we say? Because yes, as Glenn has already said, it's Drewsday. Drewsday. It is my day. It is the day that belongeth to me. So that's very cool. So thank you very much for the welcome back to Drewsday. Have you missed me, or have I missed you? Yes, I've definitely missed you. I missed the streaming actually when I'm not doing it. It does take some energy to do, because it's sometimes nice to have a break, but when I'm not doing it, I'm going, oh, I could be talking about that, and I'm not, which is a bit weird. So anyway, it's nice to be back. There we go, so all good stuff. Who have we got on the stream? We have Glenn, of course, Commander Terra Firma, JR1988, good to see you. Commander Shorty is here as well, Willie1974, good year 1974, G-Idge, how do you pronounce that? Why can't you all have sensible usernames? Ellie, there we go. Okay. Anyway, Ellie, G-Idge and Ellie Edion, close enough. Okay. Anyway, lovely to see you. Alan is here. Sapphire is here. Freaky Deaky Dude is here. Unholy Demigod. No, there's a good one. Just welcome to the Unholy Demigod. Thank you very much, Gaius Sapphires. Awesome stuff. Man versus Pixels. Normal usernames are already taken. See, I must admit, I think mine is just Dru-ids. It's extremely boring. I try and be creative in other works. I've never been very good at coming up with usernames, actually. So it's just one of those things, but never mind. Willie1974 is booked in for my mullet removal. I know, look at me. I mean, I've got so much hair in places where probably it's just not appropriate to have hair, really, now. Just to make your imagination run extremely wild at this point. Yeah, I've got bits of fluff. Look, it's all pulling out on the back, and it's just horrible. I can't wait to have a haircut. I don't think I'm just going to complete zap. Yeah, it's just going to be like laser cutting thickness. It's just growing out sideways, and it's just completely unmanageable. And when the wind blows, then it's the first time I've experienced having hair in my eyes. For the first time since I can actually remember. I think the last time I had hair this long, I was at university and I was being a bit of a goth. And I had hair all over the place. It was just a complete mess. So Drew's username should be Retro Mixtape. That's not a bad one, actually. Good stuff. Unholy Demigod, just use this for literally everything. It's a good idea, actually. Once you get one that works, then go for it. So yeah, so I'm very dishevelled, and it's just the thing is once I don't know, once my hair becomes actually something I have to worry about, it's too long as far as I'm concerned. I like it to stay out of the way. I like to be able to go in the shower or the bath, kind of go with the shampoo, rinse it off, put a comb through it once, and then forget about it for the rest of the day. Any more than that is, as far as I'm concerned, is way too much work. So I don't enjoy. At the moment, I'm having to, when I come back in from being outside, I catch myself in the mirror and I just look like a scarecrow. It's just like really, really bad. And it's like hairs everywhere, and there's like bits sticking up, and it's all kind of fluffy out the sides, and it's coming into my eyes. It's just annoying. It's just a disaster. So I'm looking forward to being tidied up. I feel very dishevelled at the moment, and it's just not good, which is not good. But there we go. Never mind. I went to town today, says Alan, and the queues for the barbers were stretching out. I'm not surprised. Yeah, our barber actually has an app. I have a virtual queue for my barber, but I think it's going to be a bit manic for a few days. So I'm going to wait a few days and try later in the week, because I hate queuing. I'm not, in that respect, I'm not very British. The British are supposed to have, or is it the English? I'm not sure. One or other has got we're supposed to have a gene for queuing, and I haven't got this gene. You're wasting my time, all you other people, by existing ahead of me, and that's I find that very, very irritating. So I don't like queuing. I'm not very patient. So the question is lockdown removed over there? Well, not quite. No, we've gone to a point where we've relaxed the rules a bit. So we now have some non-essential shops are open. We can, I think I'm right in saying, and don't quote me on this because I'll be wrong, I think we're now able to meet a certain number of people outside at the same time, but not inside each other's houses. Schools are open, of course, and obviously the key thing at the moment is that we can go to the pub as long as we stand outside, because non-essential shops are now open, and hospitality stuff, of course. So you can now go and go to a cafe and places like that. But I think most of them you still have to be outside, or there's very, very limited indoor seating or something like that. So But of course, because that's the rules in England, the rules in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, of course, slightly different because we never do anything, in concert with the other immediate countries around here. So it's a bit odd. So it's getting better, I think, is the thing. Six people, 2 households can meet outdoors. There we go. So that Alan's on the detail. Excellent. Sounds as if you're part French. They don't like queuing either. French, you can't copy French. Actually, to be honest, one of these days I'm going to have to delve into my ancestry because I have really got no idea where I'm from a kind of genetic origin. I mean, obviously I'm a kind of Caucasian white male, so that kind of narrows it down a degree. But my ancestors, on my mum's side of my family, the ancestors came from Ireland. I definitely know that. And in Ireland for several generations, so there'll be quite a bit of the Irish in me from that perspective. The other side of my family comes from Canada, but not for very long, and we think they emigrated from Scotland about 5 generations ago now. But there aren't. Wagar is not as you probably not surprised. Now, Wagar isn't really a Scottish surname. It doesn't originate from Scotland, so we're not. And Wagar, when you look it up, everyone in the UK, everyone in England says Wagar is just a corruption of wager. So it means that you once were people who paid wages, and probably quite nasty tax collectors or something. And so that's the easy explanation. But it's not as simple as that. I don't think. I got a feeling we've got some Scandinavian origins in there mixed about something, but I haven't sat down and done all the homework on it, so I don't know. It's the answer where I come from, what my ancestry is. It's definitely quite a kind of eclectic mix of stuff. And this is, I've said before in the stream, I don't feel particular loyalty to any one country other than the fact, actually I've lived in England most of my life, so I suppose I have a bit of loyalty. But I'm not a very nationalistic person. I suppose I consider myself a citizen of planet Earth, and only because there's nowhere else to live. So there we go. There we go. From Google, says Glenn. The surname Wagar was first found in Yorkshire. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Where they held a family seat of Lords of the Manor. Well, I quite like that. I think I shall go back to Yorkshire then as a Lord of the Manor. It sounds more like something Scandinavian. Well, yeah. See, I need to sit down and go and do some history. But there we go. So anyway, I'm missing bits of the chat now. Wales is slightly different. Wales, it's a bit diff. Yes. Okay. So, and then Glenn says they've opened most shops now in California. Excellent. Disneyland and theme parks might open in a month or so. We've got 50% vaccination. That's good. Jayton66 says, "Good evening, Drew. Are you wearing your tight pants tonight?" Now this is quite a fun reference because I got sent this picture a couple of days ago now, and. For some reason, and I'm sure it's nothing to do with me, but it's just quite funny as a coincidence. There's this dead space cowboy has turned up in Elite Dangerous. Some of the POIs, and somebody sent this to me. Said, "Drew, you've been killed in the game." When I looked at it, it's like there's this poor cowboy and some tragically unfashionable clothing I hastened around, which I wouldn't be seen dead in. Well, actually, obviously, perhaps I would be seen dead in. Clearly, I have been killed. So a lot of people speculating whether or not I have been killed in the universe of Elite Dangerous. The question is, what would I be doing alive in the universe of Elite Dangerous, 1,000 years in the future? I don't know, but a few people have been saying, "Why is that guy wearing Drew's hat?" Or is it Drew? So so you can probably find that on the various different forums. I think even. Obsidian admin to comment about it, so that was quite funny. No, I'm not wearing my tight pants, alas. I'm wearing my comfortable jeans, if that makes sense. Oh, Kaizen was the first to spot it on the Elite Week Discord, was it? Oh, props to Commander Kaizen then. Executed for crimes against. But yes, I don't think I'd want to be wearing what he was wearing. But interesting enough, he's there wearing a cowboy hat in a vacuum. Now, there's got to be a story there. I posted it on my Discord to go check my Discord and catch up because I've been a bit busy the last few days. I don't know. Why is there a cowboy? Presumably, I'm assuming it's an alpha thing, which is a bit like Sleepy Pete, whatever his name is. So. It probably won't last, but it's probably a little bit of an in-joke. So I don't know if that's Frontier having a little dig at me or it's just a coincidence, but it's probably an inside joke, and it's probably more just a space cowboy joke that is for me, but it's just quite funny. He's wearing a black dark fedora hat and he's dead. Face down in the dust in various different POIs. In fact, there's one place where there's two of him next door to each other, so it's quite funny. But anyway, it's a hat. It's a hat. That's what it is. It's definitely the hat. So if you're playing the Elite Dangerous Odyssey Alpha, on certain POIs that you can now land up, there is a space cowboy lying face down in the dirt who happens to have a black fedora, which I of course have worn for quite some time. So there we go. But anyway, thank you for the follow. Now, and I think they updated Planet. I haven't actually updated it, so I must do that before Thursday, because that's when I'll actually have a go. But we're not here to talk about Elite Dangerous. We're here to talk about me. No, that's not wrong. Otherwise, it sounds very self-serving. No, we're supposed to be here to talk about science fiction and fantasy writing. That's the purpose of this Monday evening stream. Other than just sort of waffling on about some stuff. But waffling on is, as you know, a tradition of this stream. So there we go. me. Glenn's point there. Didn't you ever say that the other Dru-id was in fact murdered? Yes, this is true. I think I've told this story before. Quite a few years ago. It must be over a decade now, actually. I was on holiday, and I came back to work, and when I came in the office, everyone went, "Oh my God, thank God you're alive." And I was like, that's an unusual way to welcome someone back to work. What's gone wrong? And it turned out, I mean, I'd been a bit incognito. I don't generally, I'm not super close to my work colleagues. I always keep work colleagues at a sort of, social distance. So I don't necessarily, so I have to tell my boss I'm going on holiday because you have to get permission. And I'll tell my, the colleagues I'm working with, oh, by the way, I'm going on holiday. But I wouldn't necessarily say where or when, other than, it's going to be in this sort of 2-week time slot that I've got off from work. So anyway, I'd merrily gone off away on holiday, out of contact. And I always have a rule when I go on holiday, is I switch off the email and I switch off the phone, and I'm out of contact. So I went, and when I came back, they were like, "Oh my God, he's still alive! How are you? Are you okay?" I was like, "What? Well, we all thought you'd be murdered." What? And apparently, and I didn't discover this until I got back, that whilst I was away in Canada, and of course being Canadian there was a bit of a connection, a Dru-id, not me I hasten to add, had actually been murdered. And it's the only other Dru-id I've ever come across. And the poor guy was actually killed. So I may be the only one left now. So I'm hoping to try and keep look after myself. So anyway, so there we go. So that's the. It's a very curious story. So when I came back at the office, everyone was most people were quite pleased. I think a few people were probably slightly disappointed. He is still alive. He didn't get killed. So make sure you tell your boss to let you know if you're going to tell them murdered beforehand. Yeah. By the way, I may not be back. So there we go. Reports of my death are definitely premature. And you can't has my stuff, as they say. MD Mailer says 07 Drew. Right on, commanders. So 07 in Command Terrorcroft says, in all early videos FDev said they were aiming for a Wild West feel. The cowboys put an Easter egg. Yes, there are quite a few Easter eggs in the alpha, which are quite fun. I've spotted quite a few of them, which is good. It makes me the prime suspect. I am the maybe in fact I am I'm an immortal being, and doomed to go down the centuries. I am the only Dru-id, and any of the other pretenders to the throne must be executed. Maybe that's how it works, like Highlander. Maybe that's where the Scottish thing comes in. So yeah, so maybe they were after me, and maybe they got the other guy. I don't know. Maybe there's an anti-Dru-id faction. The Highwaker. Are there any other Dru-ids in the world? I mean, it's difficult to find them now. There are certainly some other Wagars in the world. That's definitely true. Helen says, when my daughter was 8, there was a well-publicised murder of a girl with the same name, different spelling. That's scary, isn't it? That brings it home a little bit. When it's familiar. And I think the thing was because it's obviously Drew Wager is a fairly unusual name, but it has, it's on the internet. It has to happen eventually, right? But you can always identify me because of the hat, other than when I'm in a computer game, perhaps as a space cowboy. So I did chuckle. So anyway, if you go into the alpha, you can see a space cowboy who has been murdered by somebody, and apparently chucked out of his SRV without a spacesuit, which is a pretty nasty way to go, I think. MD Malice says, I can imagine the 3-word chant for the anti-Drew faction. Down with Drew. All these people crazed science fiction people saying, stop mucking up the Lord. Stop rationalising everything. Down with Drew. Yeah. Dear, never mind. And they're all hiding now and changing. Well, yes, you probably would want to. Who'd want to be associated with me, right? Yes, left in there in his tight underwear. I mean, not even a decent burial. His tragically unfashionable underpants. So it's a curious thing. So anyway, there we go. That's maybe I am an endangered species. Yes, maybe I should be protected from all sorts of harm. Maybe I should just be quietly left to go extinct. We shall see. But never mind. Anyway, what are we supposed to be talking about this evening? Well, actually, it does have a slight elite flavour, because I must admit, I was watching a video, not a video about the space cowboy. But actually, my son had popped it up and said, "What do you think of this, Dad? Look, someone shot down a ship." I don't know if you've all seen it, but there's this quite amusing video where I think it's Commander something of 9 or 7. It was not 7 of 9. It's 13 of something. But anyway, 16 minutes, a new record. So it's nice and fast. Yes, there we go. So the edible poets, they've all gone. They've been retconned, alas. They got eaten alive by the retcon. But there is this video of the Cobra flying over a settlement and being shot at from the ground, and actually being destroyed by a guy with a blaster and a few missiles, I think, which is quite fun. And Commander 3 of 9, there it is. So credit where credit's due. He took the footage, and I think another commander was shooting at him. And I haven't seen this video of an anaconda being punched to death. I assume that was a wind-up, but apparently it's not. There is a video you can because you can whack people. Because it's a first-person shooter in the alpha. Apparently you do a bit of damage every time you whack somebody, presumably. But it kind of, at the moment, it works on everything. Somebody's punched an anaconda to death. It's like, you think that's very realistic. So that is the thing. But it then got me thinking about, okay, well, what's space warfare? I mean, we've touched on mega weapons in this stream before, things like the Death Star and stuff like that. But we haven't actually talked so much about kind of actually fighting a war. What does that actually look like in a science fiction setting, and how do you represent it? What makes good writing for a science fiction war? There's plenty of material to kind of look at in that regard. So it's interesting to sort of see the different takes on it, from sort of semi-realistic to kind of implausible and all those kind of stuff. So that's quite interesting too. So you can punch a ship to death. I mean, that's dunk, 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 dunk. I don't think that's going to work. Demosthenes 9 has actually asked me a serious question, which is extremely ambitious for this time of the stream. But I will do my best. I think I will entertain a serious question. Thank you very much for asking a serious question. How do you write plot? I seem to have world building fine, but struggle to find stories with multiple character arcs set in that world. Do you write an outline? Do you write scenes and then join the dots? How do you go about planning the process? That's a very, very, very good question. I think it varies a lot by writer. How I do it, I definitely work out. I do tend to actually do the plot first, because my writing is very character based. You probably notice this if you read anything that I do. I generally start out with the people in the story, and that doesn't usually matter too much, the world building. So in my recent series that I've completed, the Shadeward Saga, basically I wanted the story to be the hatred and ultimate reconciliation, slight spoilers, between two sisters. who didn't actually know they were sisters. That's basically it, and the entire plot revolved around that initially, and then I started adding more to it and thinking, okay, well, where are they, and why are they having this argument, and what happened to them in the past? And then I just built upon that. So what I tend to do personally is I get the absolute core of the story. What is it I'm trying to talk about? And in this case, the entire series was the conflict between these two sisters, who didn't know they were sisters, and then because they didn't know they were sisters, actually came to hate each other because of things they'd experienced, which weren't entirely their faults on either side. It's just, you know, the society and events around them put them in that position. And I kind of wanted to explore that. And then I just threw in supporting characters to kind of build that. But the core premise was, you know, these two are effectively, you know, at each other's throats, and what's their story is how they get past that and what happens. That's the absolute core of it. And then I added things like, okay, well, where can I put this? I could put it on, you know, an average, you know, any time zone in history. I could make it a historical novel, or I could do something science fiction. I could put it in space. I could put it in a fantasy setting, but I tried to do something a bit different. And that's where I came up with some sort of sciencey thing. I thought, where am I going to put it that's a bit different to normal? And then I came up with the idea of putting it on an exoplanet that was tidally locked, and that gives you all sorts of other bits and pieces to play with. And it kind of grew from there as a story. So, you know, in terms of multiple story arcs, then I thought, okay, well, I've got two main story arcs here already. I've got the two sisters. And then I thought, well, if there's going to be, you know, the two sisters, they've got an antagonism. I kind of want somebody in between them who kind of sees things from both perspectives and then is torn a bit between the two. So I thought I'll bring in a young guy. This is the Maru character, who basically starts off meeting one of the sisters and then it ultimately falls in love with the second one. And as ends up in a situation where he's sort of compromised between the two of them, because one's his friend and one is his lover, and that makes it very, very difficult for all of them, actually, deliberately, to kind of, you know, to push the story on. Then there's a supporting cast of characters which are helping move things around and making battles happen and things explode and all sorts of good like that. And it kind of do it for that, but that's the way I do it. I do it by characterization. And to be honest, most of my plots, you could take the characters out and put them in another setting, change the description, the landscapes around a bit, and change the language a bit, and it would work fine. Virtually all of my plots are character based. They're all about people, and that tends to be the way I write my stories. So I always start with characters and then kind of move on from there, because I like this, you know, it's the exploration of what the characters do and how they react that kind of excites me as a writer. Now that's not going to work for everybody, because it's it depends on what sort of writer you are. Now, if you're a plot person, an action focused person, or you want the story to drive itself rather than the characters driving the story, then those sort of techniques are going to go. That's just sort of that's sort of how it's going to work. I had it in for Paul Maru, says. To be honest, I had it in for most of the characters. You know, so that is definitely a thing. Do I consider my style of writing character driven or plot? Definitely character driven. Okay, definitely character driven. That's just me, because I start with the characters. The first Shadeward, actually, I mean, you know, it's a 4-book series, but the core of Shadeward actually is one of the first things I ever wrote was which bit was it? I'm just trying to remember. One of the first bits I ever wrote was this confrontation between, I think it's Kiri, and it's right at the beginning of the book now. You know, somebody else. I just thought, yeah, here's this young girl who's I've put in the midst of a forest, and all she's got is a knife and an attitude, and she's being hunted. I thought, well, that would be quite a fun scene to write. So I wrote this scene. And I thought, what can I do with that? And then lots and lots of other stuff started coming out, and that's how that story carries. And you know, Shadeward is basically a 3-character story. There are 3 primary characters, 2 sisters, and this lad who gets caught in the middle of them, and that's the core of it. That's what it's all about. And everybody else is effectively a supporting character to that story, but they've got their own sort of arcs. The thing with arcs, I don't mean the in-game Elite Dangerous currency. I mean arcs as in story arcs. Is to I find it fun to obfuscate, which is an excellent word. Try and confuse the reader as to, you know, should I be rooting for this person or not? So you've probably noticed in my stories, one of the characters that you're usually introduced to early on is clearly going to be a main character, but I try and leave it very ambiguous as to whether you think they should be the goodie or the baddie, or actually maybe a combination of all of them. So you're introduced to Kiri quite early on in Shadeward. She's the first main character you meet. And in the space of the first chapter, she's basically somebody's murdered in front of her. She has to run away. She's almost kicked to death. So that's your introduction to her, and you discover that she's sort of a vagabond girl. She kills and stabs and spits and swears, and she's not actually very nice. And that's. Your idea is, okay, well, is am I rooting for her, or am I against her? And you're supposed to try and be guessing all the way through the story, because she does some pretty nasty things. She's not a particularly nice person. She's quite hard and brutal, but that's because of her upbringing, and you see some of that upbringing deliberately, so you get an idea of the sort of person she is. The idea I've always felt with my writing is to make your characters kind of interesting. And say, okay, well, actually, they're not just going to do the good thing, because they're a bit more complicated than that. So it's quite. And if you go back to the elite stuff, I mean, Salome, she's quite a nasty piece of work, actually. She's arrogant, she's rude, she's very sure of herself, she's dismissive, she doesn't take advice well. She's hugely arrogant. I mean, she's an Imperial, so she would be. And when it comes to dealing out justice, she decides to deal it out. So, okay, I'm not going to have a court of law to decide your fate. I'm going to execute you because I think you're wrong. And that's her attitude, and she just gets away with it. Again, not a very nice person. So those sort of things and I've developed that technique over time. To kind of make things hopefully more interesting when people are reading them. So, but I don't do much. I start with the characters, and to be honest, I start with the arguments. I go, okay, well, here's a character who's a bit like this. Here's a character who's a bit like this. Put them in the same room. It's a featureless room at this point, and there's no background. There's no planet. There's no story. There's no history. What are they? Just make them have an argument. What are they arguing about? And why are they arguing? Okay, what happened before that argument? And all those sort of stuff. That's kind of how I do it. That's what works for me. The Shadeward, so I mean, and then other things come together. So Shadeward is, if I concentrate on that, I mean, the core fundamental part of Shadeward is the three characters, okay, and it's the story of hatred and love and reconciliation, and between family and friends. Basically, that's kind of what it's all about. And there's themes of forgiveness in there, and there's revenge, and there's all that sort of stuff, which is all good writing fodder. The rest of it came later. So when I had the core kind of work, okay, I know what's going to happen here between these three characters, and I'm very much a plotter. Okay, so. So I can't give spoilers because everybody hasn't read Shadeward, but basically Kiri's fate, Zoella's fate, and Maru's fate, what happens to them throughout the course of that story. I worked out that entire thing long before I started putting pen to paper. Okay, so whilst I was writing Shadeward 1, book 1, I knew what was going to happen at the end of Shadeward book 4. Okay, it was all preordained. I'd worked it all out, which I personally think makes for a better multi-book story. I can't go with the whole pantser approach of let's just type stuff and see what happens. I can't do that. Okay, doesn't work for me. I have to plot it out because I like to have relatively intricate plots, and I think if you want to have a relatively intricate plot, it's got to make sense. In which case, you've got to work out where it's going, and that's how I view it. Now, not everybody will agree with that. And that's a problem. Then the rest of it came out. Okay. So then I thought, okay, well, where am I going to put these people? And I thought, I don't want your classic. It's on a spaceship, it's on a space station, it's on a planet. I don't want the average kind of just generic sort of space opera stuff. I think I can do better than that. I didn't want it to be in a fantasy world either. But I wanted some of that fantasy-ness in the story. So I wanted a bit of sword and sorcery type adventure, discovering the unknown, pitting yourself against the climate, the environment, all those kind of things that you do in a fantasy novel, which are sometimes harder to do in a sci-fi novel. And then I eventually hit on the idea. It kind of actually did occur to me on the dog walk, believe it or not, whereby I thought, hang on, we could set it on a world that's been colonized at some point in the past, but something's gone wrong with the colonization process, and everybody's forgotten how the technology works. And so the technology is there in the background, but it's sort of not really understood by the current inhabitants. And there's just beginning to be some elements of reawakening. And then I thought, what can I do with that? Well, maybe some of the people think it's religious power. Maybe they think it's God, but it's actually technology behind the scenes and all those kind of things. And it started developing from there. And then the actual environment I ended up with is this tidally locked planet. Okay, so one side always faces the star and one side always faces away, which gives you some challenges in terms of it's hard to navigate because there's no north, south, east or west, because nothing ever moves, nothing ever changes. It's hard to tell the time for the same reason. And actually, if you're out of sight of land, it's virtually impossible to navigate. And I was like, this is a problem because I want them to go on a sea voyage. How do I navigate, assuming there isn't any high technology? So I had to solve all those problems as I did the world building, and that got quite interesting and quite good fun. And then I had to get the characters to reveal it to you, the reader, bit by bit, so you could kind of pick it up as well. And all that stuff was kind of expanded out. And then I thought, okay, well, I want some sort of high technology in here, but the rest of the world I built is sort of at a medieval feudal level. So how do I accommodate that? And then I hit upon the idea of people discovering ancient technology and kind of slowly, not necessarily understanding it, but figuring out how to make it work bit by bit. And then kind of, if we stick that in there, suddenly it lights up and it's like, oh, we can do something with this. And it kind of goes on from there. And so you end up with this group of people who have figured out how to make this ancient ship work. And the idea the ship then is a vehicle to move them around to different parts of the story. Figure out how to make that ship work. And then the ship itself sort of became a character too. The ship is called the Mobilis, which is a little nod to Jules Verne, of course, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the ship itself becomes a character because the ship is a bit, unapologetically here, it's a bit sort of Millennium Falcon-y, but kind of in a ship on the sea. It's not all that reliable. It breaks down, and it's sometimes it's only running on one engine, and sometimes it gets a leak, and sometimes they have to use it for things that ships really shouldn't do. They don't really understand how it works properly, but they have to kind of keep on using it. And it becomes a character of its own. And then there's a crew on board the ship. Okay, well, what kind of characters do I have on board a ship? And that's the process. It's iterative, and I expand around it until I think I've got enough to actually write the entire story, and then I plot it through in huge depth. I can actually show you. I mean, this will be slight spoilers, but if I show you, I can show you how I do it. I can show you the structure I use for plotting. Where is it? Shadeward Saga. There we go. So here I actually have Shadeward Saga background and detail. So this is actually I'm going to have to get it to show my screen. For some reason it's not showing anything. Let's do window capture. That'll probably do the job. Give me a mo. There we go. That one. There we go. So this is actually it. This thing here. So this is me designing Shadeward. So I write it down as if I'm documenting it. Okay. So this is the plot outline. So whilst the story may appear to be a fantasy novel, it's not. It's science fiction. That's what I've written. I've put it on a kind of semi-realistic world. I've done some research into what that semi-realistic world is like. It's tidally locked. It's not that far away. It's around a real star. You could actually see this in the night sky. I work out, here you can see I've got some prehistory stuff. I've got some later prehistory. What's happening in the present time. So there's a little bit of world building here in the sense of there was an empire, the empire broke up into different factions and all those kind of things. Then there are descriptions of some of the plants, some of the animals on this planet. Then I've gone through, as you can see here, about the different occupations, and this isn't the work of an afternoon. This is the work of several weeks. How the technology works, how the measurements work, how time is measured, words and sayings, and then there's basically a plot. For each book is a plot. So this is book 1, and what happens. Kiri's introduced, etc., etc., etc. So minor spoiler there. Then I've also written out the character bios. Okay, so here are the main characters, at least. So that there's Kiri, and what is it's all about her. So I worked out what happens to her. You can see Zoella there as well. Maru is there as well, and a few of the other characters as well. Then there's secondary characters too, and I've kind of gone through the whole thing. So that's what my plan for that. It's kind of like my Bible, basically. Okay, that's my plan. That's how I do it. That's how. And I can also show you very quickly now. It's Doomdark's Revenge. I can't show you that. That one definitely is spoilers. That's what I'm currently working on, but I can't show you that. That would definitely be spoilers. But Elite Dangerous, for example. So Elite Reclamation have done the same thing. Where is it? Plot and approval. There we go. So that's the Elite Reclamation one, which isn't working because I've got to do some clever stuff with my OBS. Hang on a minute. Dun 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 dun. No, not Streamlabs. That one. There we go. So this is the Elite Dangerous one. This is for Elite Reclamation. So a similar sort of thing. This one was actually kind of written for Frontier, actually. So a bit of background. Where is it happening? Prism system. What's the politics? Well, it's based on Elite Dangerous. What's the technology? Well, given its basis in the computer game, the technology involved is fairly standard sci-fi fare: lasers, missiles, shields, hyperspace-capable ships, both big and small. So this is like 8 years old now. Where is the prison system? So this is pre-Elite Dangerous being a thing. So I was having to draw all this stuff by hand. But this stuff is actually still true to the game. All this stuff is actually still in Elite Dangerous. Imperial systems reference. So here are the other systems referenced in the story. Again, places that you can go and visit. The star map. Well, there was no star map in Elite Dangerous, so I guesstimated what the star map should look like. And you can see here where the Prism system is, where Sol is, where Akanar is, and so on and so forth. So this is how I designed the plot for Elite Reclamation. The locations and the ships. How you pronounce it, and then basically some character bios. So here is Kahina and what she looks like, how she acts. She is aggressive and sharp-tongued, considered arrogant, intolerant by many. I think that's fair enough. And that's how it kind of works. Then you've got Dolk and Hassan and Octavia Quinton. And I found it useful in Elite Reclamation particularly to have some these weren't commissioned by me. These are just things I pinched off the internet. But it's I found it helpful to get a visual image actually to write against in this particular case. In some because, and then there's the backstory, and then there's the synopsis of the story and what happens. Notice here I never updated this right until the last draft. Most of these places weren't named. Octavia's secret hideout at brackets dark system TBD. So some of that detail was finished right at the end of that sort of stuff. And then I was mucking about, to get some kind of space ideas. There was no Elite Dangerous, so I was using Space Engine to generate me some sort of artwork of what places might look like. And then I think there might be a picture. Maybe there's not in that one, but but that's how I do it. So here's these are some of the lesser characters, if you like. So, for example, Kahina Salome has a sister, or two sisters actually, one called Kareen and one called Tala. And I didn't do too much work here. Kareen is a beautiful blonde woman in the prime of her life. She is the most favoured daughter of the lineage, being the oldest of the three daughters by a few minutes. Okay. Kareen is effectively a spoilt brat. She's selfish and arrogant, though she can be charming and demure when required, usually to get her own way. And Kareen has been fawned over throughout her entire life and expects everything to be delivered to her on a golden platter. Silver ones aren't good enough. She's actually quite intelligent, but a life of privilege and little duty has served to make her completely self-obsessed. Kareen enjoys taunting her younger sister Kahina at every opportunity. They hate each other. Okay, so that is the limit of the character development I did for Kareen, because she's basically only in a couple of chapters and then gets brutally murdered. and that's as far as I went. Okay. Tala, the poor girl, is the middle sister. Tala is very similar to Corinne, just a little less striking. So she's like the pale shadow of her sister. Being the second sister and less desirable a result, Tala is rather more measured and rounded than Corinne. Unfortunately, she also lacks Corinne's scheming mind and intelligence. She is easily forgotten. Okay, Tala is Corinne's twin, but born second, always overshadowed. She has ultimately accepted that she will never play a very significant role in the family. She is more interested in art and music and considers it an acceptable compromise. So she's happy to play fiddle, and that's it. As you know, Kahina is not quite that, because obviously she's one of the major characters, and that's the way I basically do it. So that's the way. I hope that's useful. That's the way I do my story plotting, and I think if I'm going to have to do this again very quickly. Let me just get the Lords of Midnight one up, because that one again is out in the open as well. I can't show you the Doomdark's Revenge one yet because it's all spoilers, but Lords of Midnight's been out for a few years. Where is that one? Books. What am I looking for? Midnight Chronicles. So Lords of Midnight is here. Lords of Midnight overview. There we go. Oh, and the wretched word. OBS is a bit funny with the way it does this stuff. Add source. Let's just try this again. No, not a media source. I want a window. Window. There we are. This is less than ideal. This stuff. Right, there we go. So this is Lords of Midnight. Again, it's very, very similar. Okay, so it's basically what's the backstory. How does the map work? So here are key locations in the story. The game appearance. This is what the game looks like. Still, we're basing it off a computer game. Modifications. Basically, I've said here, Lords of Midnight borrows much of its quest and narrative design from epic works such as Lord of the Rings. It's straightforward to draw comparisons and rather too obvious for today's reader. It will be important to distinguish the story sufficiently. Morkin's quest to destroy the Ice Crown needs to be made separate from other narratives' quests, such as does Luxor's battle with Doomdark. So those are things that I was considering as I wrote it. And then the primary characters again. So I grabbed the graphics from the game. Luxor, the Lord of the Free, but unaware of his destiny, etc., 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 etc. So that's the way I do it. Features of the landscape. So again, things pulled from the game. How does it work? What's the plot? This one I actually color coded as I was doing it, so I knew what I'd actually written, and use it as a kind of progress indicator. So that's how I do it. Okay, that gives you an insight. He thinks again. Yes, he does. So that's how I do it. I start off with the characters. The characters always interest me the most, and I spend most of my time thinking, okay, so we've got an interesting character here. What makes them tick? What sort of mannerisms do they have? What do they look like? What sort of attitude do they have? Are they friendly? Are they frosty? Are they nice? Are they hostile? Are they arrogant? Are they cocksure? Are they shy? All those sort of things. And then I ask myself, once I've got a penned outline of what a character is like today, then I go back and go, well, why are they like that? What happened to them to make them like that? And out of those sort of details, the stuff starts to come together. And then I kind of work on, okay, well, why would these characters meet? Why are they in the same place? And what sort of things are going on? So that's basically how I do it. I only have one document because I find it much easier to work with. So that's kind of how I do it. And I'm a moderately successful writer. I certainly wouldn't say I'd hit the big time or anything. But what I do get back from people who've read my books is that the characters in the story do seem very well rounded, well realised, and that's always heartening to me, because that's where I spend 80% of my effort. The rest of the stuff is interesting, and I spent a lot of time with the world building on Shadeward in particular. And of course with Elite, all the world building is done for you, so that was relatively easy. So I could spend all the time on the characters without having to worry about, okay, well, I need to invent a spaceship. How does a spaceship work? Because that was all done for me in Elite, which is good and bad, because of course on one hand you've got all the detail, and on the other hand you can't change anything because it's not allowed. At least with my own universe, you can kind of work out the way things want to work. So, JL 1988, the first deception of the Shadeward Saga for me was initially thought the title referred to a grand fantasy-style quest where a group of characters must travel quite literally Shadeward. Well, that was an aspect of it, and I was thinking I can actually. And one of the reasons why Shadeward would never be picked up by a traditional publisher. And many people said to me when I was constructing it, some of my author friends actually said, you'll never get anybody to publish it because you're not obeying the rules. And I went, yes, I know. I never obey the rules, you know that. And they were kind of like, say, yes, but you've got such good ideas here. If you put it in a proper science fiction setting, then you'll be able to sell it as a science fiction series. And I said, yeah, but that will compromise what I'm trying to do. And other people saying, well, okay, well, don't compromise that. It's clearly a swords and sorcery sort of novel. Leave it as a swords and sorcery novel. I said, well, that's not true to it either, because it's set in the real world, or a real world, not this real world. And Shadeward straddles the line. It's a fantasy style story written in a hard science fiction universe. And so everything in the Shadeward Saga is absolutely plausible. There is no breaking of the laws of physics. Even if you think there's an explanation that fits the laws of physics for what you see in the story. And yet the entire story, pretty much up until you get towards the end, appears to be a fantasy tale where there's magic and there's weird stuff going on. And I wanted to write that. I just wanted to write the story I wanted to write. So genres be damned, I said. damn the genres, full speed ahead. And so I've got this story which has a very fantasy feel, in the sense you've got strange mystical powers that only some people seem to be able to command, a feudal medieval society that's trying to crawl out of the Dark Ages, and yet this weird science background which is absolutely totally plausible in all regards. And I was very strict with myself. There would be no suspension of the laws of physics for the Shadeward novels, because what I intend to do, and what I will do shortly, is expand the Shadeward universe into space, because there's other stories to be told in the same universe, and that's my ultimate aim. I do like swords. I actually have a few swords, and I've learned how to use a sword. And I actually did, believe it or not, for Elite Reclamation, and I was interested in it beforehand, but for Elite Reclamation you'll notice there's quite a lot of hand-to-hand combat in Elite Reclamation, and there is sword play. And in order to make sure I was writing it correctly, I went and learnt some martial arts and some sword play. Partly because I was interested in it anyway, but I thought, if I can do it properly, then I can write it properly. I learnt hand-to-hand combat, kickboxing and aikido and various other forms of martial art, and I learnt how to use a sword, and how you strike with a sword, and what different weapons are used for, and those kind of things, and I can put that then into the writing for shape. And one of the things which struck me straight away, actually, which you'll notice perhaps if you've read Elite Reclamation, fights are extremely short. Okay. In most movies where the protagonists sort of swing at each other and punch at each other and damn, you got me, and poof, you got me again, and poof, you got. It doesn't. That's not how fights are. Okay, fights are very quick. They're over in just a few seconds, if they're at all serious. And I was able to, because of course when you're practicing things, you do get things wrong. And I occasionally got clunked in the head by a fake sword, a wooden sword, or I got stabbed to death by an imaginary knife, because we use practiced knives, which either retract or they're just effectively rubber, so they look real and they're heavy enough to feel like they're real, and you can stab people with them, but they obviously don't do any damage, because that would be very, very bad. And the idea being that you learn to defend yourself against a knife attack in these sort of self-defense classes. And so the number of times I vicariously died, having been stabbed to death by my opponent, was quite good. Whereas my particularly favourite example of this is actually in Shadeward 3, where Kiri encounters this guy who's basically saying, I don't believe a woman can fight. This is outrageous. And he basically challenges her to a duel, and Kiri goes, all right then. She stands up in the middle of basically dinner, and this guy says, well, we will fight at dawn then. And she goes, no, we'll fight now. She just, what? Well, here at dinner, and she says, "Yeah, I want to have my dessert." You know, she's very cool and laid back about it. And she basically, you know, she says, no, I'm not waiting till dawn. If you want to fight, let's have a fight. So okay, they sort of square off. He stabs at her. She basically just grabs his arm, twists his wrist, breaks his ankle, takes his knife, stabs him through the heart, lets him fall on the ground, and walks off. And it's literally as brutal and as quick as that. And then she's, I did enjoy writing this bit. She sits down and goes, "Where's my dessert?" Which is one of my favourite scenes. Actually, just kind of gives you an overview of Kiri's character. She's extremely cold at times, and. So I went to a lot of self-defense classes and learnt how to handle a fight. And I'm not saying, you know, if somebody really came out with me with a knife, I wouldn't necessarily be any good, because I would probably freeze and go, it's actually a real knife. But hopefully some part of the instinctive, you know, mechanism of how to deal with it might do me some good. But it was mostly so I could kind of, okay, in a real fight, what does it actually feel like when you get stabbed and then suddenly you're dying, you know, and all those sort of things? Or, you know, if you get caught and your arm's twisted and you're flung on the ground, you know, that moment of being stunned and all those kind of things. And Suriel is actually quite correct in the sense, actually, if somebody does come after you with a knife, even if you know some martial art, the best thing to do is to run, because the chances are, even if you do know what you're doing, you are going to get hurt. A knife is an extremely dangerous thing. So, you know, so do run. Suriel is quite correct. Those things are quite interesting. You know, and when I write something, I do like to try and research those kind of things. So I'm aware that book 4 hasn't come out in Audible yet. I'm still working on that, so no spoilers for the ending. But the only thing I will say is that the plot was worked out for Shadeward right from the start. So in terms of me, the writer, no surprises throughout, because I knew where they were going and what was going to happen to all the characters by the end of the book. And, you know, stuff happens to the characters by the end of the book. So that's quite good. Dru is doing spoilers, so hopefully not too many spoilers. But that's my writing process. I do like to get behind some of the mechanics. Now, obviously, with, you know, and as you've seen on the stream, I like to pick things apart to sort of see how they work. You know, obviously, there aren't really any actual, alas, Cobra Mark IIIs in existence. They don't exist yet. So I can't kind of basically get on board a Cobra Mark III and go, okay, what does it feel like to be on a Cobra Mark III? But in Elite Dangerous, of course, you know, I did have the opportunity to play the original alpha for the game. And as a result of playing the original alpha for Elite Dangerous, I did revise quite a lot of Elite Reclamation, in the sense of, okay, so now I'm as close as I can be to sitting inside a spaceship in this universe. What effect is that having on me as I perceive the reality of the game, and have I captured it in the book? And actually, in a few places I hadn't, I felt, done sufficient, you know, job of capturing the essence of what it was like to fly a Cobra Mark III spacecraft. Some of the things that really jumped out at me in the alpha for Elite Dangerous back, you know, 7 years ago, was the sound of the ship accelerating and the little blink, 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 blink as you change system engines and settings, all those kind of things. I thought, I need to capture that in the book. So I rewrote some of the spaceship scenes to take into account the experience of being in the cockpit, because I like that sort of level of attention to detail. Did I know? Sapphire says, did I know it would be exactly 4 books from start? No, I didn't. I thought at one point it was going to be 5. But when I refined the plot, because I worked the plot out and then I sort of chop it up, and it felt initially that was going to be 5 chunks. And then as I got towards the end of book 2, I thought, I'm really going to have to stretch out this section here and pad it a bit to make it into 5 books. And I don't like the idea of padding things just because they're things to pad. So I actually did construct it a bit so I could put it into 4 books rather than 5. So it was originally going to be 5 books and then it ended up at 4. Now, I have had actually a bit of criticism on book 3. A few people saying it's too rushed. The characters never stand still for 5 minutes, and they're always running around dealing with some kind of crisis. They never get a chance to sort of kick back and relax, which is potentially a valid criticism, because there definitely was a case that the action has been constricted a little bit to push it into 4 books rather than 5. So I did pay a bit of attention to book 4 to make sure there are some spaces in book 4 where the characters just get to chill out around the campfire a little bit and have a chat about the state of the world and what they're going to do next, rather than just dive straight into the next sort of set piece. So there was a little bit of criticism on book 3 that I'd rushed it a bit. So I've been mindful of that. Rejoicing at the derail. So we can cover the topic about space space battles another time. So here we go. So total derail. You have succeeded, my friends, in utterly derailing the entire stream. So well done. That's very good. But yeah, this is a writing stream, and it's designed to be very organic. It's absolutely not a problem talking about other things. But and if there's questions on the writing, the planning, and how you get from an idea to a book, I think that's totally a valid thing to do. And I've got, I've written now lots. It must be about 9 or 10 books. And so that gives me a fair bit of experience in terms of how to do these things. Best defense against knife. That's not a knife. This is a knife. I love that scene. That's a brilliant one. Glenn says, there were some scenes I recall, and the pace slowed a bit in book. So book 3, and that's another thing, in terms of pacing and stuff. So that's an interesting thing, because I had the idea of trying to trick the reader, particularly with books 1 and 2. Okay, so in books 1 and 2 of Shadeward, in book 1 of Shadeward, for example, there are 3 main characters that you really get introduced to in any depth, and those are Kiri, Zoella, and Maru. And book 1 is designed to set you up that you are sympathetic to all 3 characters. Okay, so you're kind of wondering, okay, these 3 characters are clearly important because they're the ones that Dru's obviously spending all his time on. And you've got the idea Kiri's had a really tough background, but basically she's kind of okay. But at the end of book 1, something really nasty happens to her, and as a result of that, her heart gets kind of, actually the universe just isn't fair. It's a cruel, horrible place. To survive in a cruel, horrible place, you've got to be cruel and horrible yourself. And then she sort of adopts that persona. And the idea, I was trying to make put the idea in you, the reader's head, that okay, Kiri is going to be nasty and tough, but not in a vindictive way. She's nasty and tough because that's the way she sees the universe around her, because she's just experienced lots of grief, lots of pain, lots of agony, and that's made her into a tough, hard person. By contrast, Zoella has, she's seen some pretty nasty things as well, but she's actually a much more sort of gentle soul. And so you get the idea that Zoella is much more empathetic, much more wanting to listen to people, much more wanting to kind of understand them, and so on and so forth. So you get that kind of essence to her character. And in Maru, you get the perspective of, okay, he's just interested in what the hell's going on this planet, because he's just your classic kind of, oh, how does that work? What does this do? When I plug this in, it lights up. What does that mean? There's things in the sky. Well, what do they mean? He's just the classic curious guy who wants to work out stuff. And so book 1 is really mostly about establishing those 3 characters as who they are. And then in book 2, I deliberately start squeezing the emotional kind of triggers. So Kiri, effectively, through the situation she's in, goes on the warpath. She starts killing people because she can. She's really good at fighting. She learns how to be a fighter. She learns how to be brutal. She learns how to kill. She's trained as a warrior. And she finds that she's really good at it. Whereas on the flip side, Zoella is in using, she strengthens that sort of empathic gift that she has, and becomes a trusted advisor and a counselor kind of character to a lot of the people she's with. Whereas Maru is your ability to understand the technology that's behind the world and all that kind of good stuff. So that's the storytelling capabilities of those different characters. And then I twist it round in book 3, and I turn that on its head, whereas you start to feel a little bit more sympathetic to Kiri and a little bit less sympathetic to Zoella due to some of the things that happen between the characters, and Maru just gets mixed up in the whole thing as well. So I'm hoping that you go into book 4 with a kind of like, I've got no idea who's coming out on top of this, if anybody is, and the idea is that you're kind of fascinated by the characters at that point to figure out where's this going to go, where's it going to end, and that's what I've been trying to do. If that makes sense. Basically, and Zebra, to Zebra there, you're exactly right. That's basically it. So Careful when fighting monsters that you do not become one. That is exactly the process that Zoella herself goes through. Okay, so Zoella starts off with quite a, she's actually kind of quite nice. And then the thing, the fact that she makes some assumptions about what's going on, the fact that she lets those take control of her a little bit, turns her into a place where she actually becomes a monster too. You'll see that as you go through the story. So it's basically saying, even if you start out bad or even if you start out good, there's a path ahead of you that can change you. So you've got to be very wary of the emotions you let into your life as they start to control you. So between the three characters, there's this sort of switching of, okay, which one's in the wrong here? Which one's in the right? I'm not sure. And it's been deliberately set up that way to kind of keep you guessing as to the motivations of the characters. And then you've got a supporting cast around them, which are basically looking at that, okay, trying to influence things and get things done, and they're sort of helping move the plot along and various other bits. And then you get all the side plots and other bits and pieces in there as well. So those things are quite fun, and I suppose trick the reader is a bit of isn't the best phrase actually, but it is trying to not be the obvious story. And I don't write my stories to be deliberately kind of obtuse so that they're hard to understand. I write them to be interesting. So you're kind of like, okay, well, this character, I get where she's coming from here, because she's had a difficult upbringing, so she's going to be distrustful, and that's going to make it hard for her to make friends and have relationships with people. That all makes sense. And now she's gone off and done that. She's hurt the person that she actually wants to be with, and I get why she's done it, and isn't that a tragedy and all that sort of stuff. You're trying to make things plausible and kind of, okay, well, she's screwed up that relationship again, and I can see it coming. Don't do. You're kind of like. That's the reaction I'm trying to get from you. Don't do that. No, stop. Too late. She's done it. So that's that sort of thing. And you also can put some sort of slightly older and slightly wiser characters in, who the main antagonist can sometimes turn to for advice, or sometimes they're not as sympathetic here. In fact, there's a situation which I quite like in Shadeward, where Zoella has done a bad thing, and she sort of goes to one of the mentor type characters for a bit of absolution, and she basically doesn't get it. She says, "No, I can't help you. What you've done, I can't help you. You shouldn't have done it. It's as simple as that. You've got to face the consequences of what you've done. I can't help you. You're going to have to face it." And it's actually quite hard and quite brutal. There isn't any forgiveness there at that point, because she's done a bad thing, and the characters have to basically say, no, you've got to live with that. So that was fun. And so you as the reader are basically kind of, I was rooting for this character in the last book. I felt really sorry for him, but this book, they turned out an absolute nasty piece of work, and I don't feel happy with them at all. But it's trying to make that realistic but compelling, and I think that's quite good. So that's what I'm trying to do. So it is, Serial's right. We're all monsters and angels inside. We have good and bad tendencies, and I don't like I never have done really books where there's obvious goodies and obvious baddies. People just aren't like that. Somebody else said, I've seen good people do bad things and I've seen bad people do good things, and that's very true. Unless and sometimes there's an outside influence as well. So so I do like playing around with that sort of stuff. That's my modus operandi, if you like, as a writer. I always play with the characters and the scenery around them. I do like to get it right. I spent a lot of time trying to make it consistent. As you've probably seen with my criticism of Frontier and things like that, I get really irritated when people go, nah, we'll just change the background because we need to. That winds me up. I don't think it's a very... Professional is not the right word. I just think it's a lazy way of solving the problem. You should solve the problem in situ with some clever thinking. So when there were loads of places in Shadeward where I thought, I'll just bend the rules here and make them able to do this. And I thought, no, that busts the whole point of the book. So Kiri can't have a magic power that gets her out of this position. She has to work with what the rules of the world say the rules of the world are. So I've got to think around the problem and get them out of that sort of stuff. So so nobody in Shadeward is in a position where they can cheat the rules of the world. They have to operate with the rules of the world. And I was very strict with myself all the way through, basically saying, no, there can be no bending of the rules in order just to get them out of a tight, plot, problem. And that's why I plotted it end to end, because I thought, if I'm not careful, and I've done this before when I've tried to just kind of wing it, I've written myself what they call writing yourself into a corner, where you get yourself into a situation where the only way your characters can get out of a problem is by some miraculous thing happening, which just, well, that was convenient. And I've tried really, really hard to avoid that in Shadeward. So there isn't suddenly, there's a helicopter poised above with a rope, or actually yes, they can come back from the dead in certain circumstances. I've just invented that. I don't do that. So I've been very strict with myself, trying to make sure that I don't employ that sort of Deus ex machina kind of plot scripting, whereby you actually actually there's no way they're going to get out of this, so magic. And I don't do that, okay? When scripts, and most movies are very bad at this, quite a lot of books are quite bad at this. They get themselves to a place, and it's a great story and everything's going fine, and the heroes run into a bit of problem, but something very implausible then has to happen in order for them to escape. And I've tried to avoid that as much as possible. And so so I kind of do that. In challenging times of decline, stories have characters as well. So that's an interesting observation, actually. Low Earth Orbit is am I writing because of the time? And I must admit, I suppose if you asked me, you'd probably have to get me quite a few pints of beer, but I would probably say, in the dark recesses of a pub late at night after a few pints, that I was very disappointed with humanity. In general terms, not in individual terms, but in general terms, because I do see a lot of compromise. I do see a lot of laziness. I do see a lot of that'll do, that's good enough, and I don't see the attention to detail and the quality in workmanship that I'd like to see in certain things. And in day-to-day life, on things like social media, I just see people whinging about their lives and not doing anything about it to fix it. I see a lot of people just desperate for attention, but with nothing really to show. And that might be really cruel and mean and heartless thing to say, but that's the sort of impression I get, and I wonder if I'm writing about that sort of dissatisfaction in some ways. And I'm trying to write some characters who are a bit more dynamic and a bit more interesting than the people I see about me some of the time. I don't know, maybe that's horribly cruel. I don't know, but I find I find a lot of people very I don't know, they have no sense of purpose, or they're bemoaning this or they're bemoaning that, all those sort of things. I don't know, those are things that I definitely are in the background of my writing, not in the foreground, but definitely in the background. Disappointed is the word. We're dissatisfied with institutions and it shows in our stories and media. So I agonise about getting the right emotive stance for my characters. So when there's a scene at the end of Shadeward 3, which is obviously a major cliffhanger, so I won't go into it because of spoilers, but there's a very tense moment, a very, very, very tense moment between Kiri and Zoella at the end of this. It's been revealed at that point that they're sisters. They both know that they're sisters, and they've got the tension of, okay, well, we are actually blood relations, but there's a lot of bad blood between us, kind of stuff, and that's the setup to this scene. It was a very hard scene to write because I was trying to make it very, very, very emotionally charged, and I was trying to make it realistic, and I was trying to ensure that it was it punched. It was really a scene where you read it and you went, whew, okay. You kind of had to sort of, and a few people said, I had to put the book down a couple of times as I went through that section, which is, I went, yes, that's the result I was going for. And there's a few scenes like that in Shadeward 4 where, a few people have said, I had to put the book down. I had to put the book down at certain points because I just had to recover a little bit when I was reading it, which to me is a sign of a book which is good. And I wanted, and other writers possibly on the stream will say, and hopefully agree with me on this, that when you're writing things like that, you are putting an awful lot of emotive energy, and energy is not really the right word because it's not energy, it's concentration, I suppose. But you're putting a lot of your self into those scenes. You're working hard to get the emotional resonance right, and it's very tiring to write things like that, and then you've got to get the fine details and get it out and make sure it's exactly how you want it to be. So as far as I'm going to listen to it, so there is a major cliffhanger at the end of book 3, Sophia, so just brace yourself. It's very hard to get those things right. I did actually, particularly with the end of Shadeward 3 and Shadeward 4, because you are wrapping things up and you're bringing things to a conclusion. Yes, there's lots of stress and tension in the characters there, but I did start dreaming about them, which is always a slightly worrying sign that you might be obsessing about these things a bit too much. And I did start dreaming about some of the characters, which means I was getting a little bit crossing the line of sanity perhaps a bit. But you get like that as a writer because you're trying to put human life or human emotion, human context into these characters who only exist in words on a page. So I'm not telegraphing the stream locally. Like it's a funny look. Well, the thing is, I've got a lot of. Facebook calls them friends, of course, which is the wrong word on social media. They're not, and dare I say that they're not. Most of them are not friends in my definition. They're people I know who I kind of we can all go down the pub and share a drink and have a nice chat with. That to me is an acquaintance. That's not a friend, because I don't spend enough time with you to know if you're my friend or not. So the friend, Facebook friend is a bit of a curious thing. I like spending time with them. So is that enough to qualify as a friend? Maybe it is. Maybe it's my definition, but I tend to turn that as an acquaintance. And on Twitter, I think it's better followers, people who are interested in what you have to say. Now, why anybody follows me, I've got no idea, but some people do, because I like wittering away on internet streams, and that's quite amusing. But that I get, and I like it. I like interacting with people. Parasocial acquaintances, maybe that's the right thing. So that's and other people have read what I've written, and this is interesting. And Alan's, but I think just touched on this. I wonder what people think of me. People, have read what I've written, and gone, how did you write that? What life experience led you to write something like that? And I just sort of give them a knowing smile. I say, well, things have happened to me in my life which I have committed into stories, and that's just life experience, isn't it? Those things are interesting. I've drawn on life experiences that I've gone through in the sense of some of the stuff that I've put into my fantasy, novels. Because they're real situations and they're real things. I've got another book actually, which is the first book I ever wrote, which actually needs a really, really bad re-edit now. And one of these days I will republish, which is Torn, which is the first book I ever wrote, which is actually the only book I've ever written in a contemporary setting. And a lot of people, I got a few reviews actually of some of the scenes in that where somebody said, this is a totally unrealistic scene. This could never happen. This is ridiculous. It's just an emotional drawstring, and Dru's just deliberately pulling emotional strings here to get an effect. The situation is entirely unrealistic. And oddly enough, that review was referring to an experience that my wife and I actually had. And it's quite funny for a reviewer to basically say, no, that real experience you had is totally unbelievable. So there's quite a lot in Torn, which is actually about my life and my wife's life. It's almost semi-autobiographical. It's quite funny, and not all of it, but because it's a made-up novel. But there's an awful lot of things that happen in real life, which if you wrote them into a book, everyone would go, nah, that's just it's just ridiculous. So all the broken machinery in my books is based on past vehicles. You've heard, yes, that's definitely the case. Well, I've always liked technology, and technology is more than just the sum of its parts. So, so I have great effect. You probably all know that I have a little collection of classic cars, and I like working on good old-fashioned, honest machinery. And I don't believe that there's a soul in a machine or anything kind of metaphysical like that. But to me, a machine does have an essence to it. And when I get home after a long drive, I don't know if some of you guys do this, I always tap the dashboard and go, well done, car, you did a good thing. I'm not really sure who I'm talking to, but the car has done a good thing. It deserves a bit of thanks as far as I'm concerned. And I do, and it's probably an autistic thing actually, to be fair. It may be an autistic thing, because I'm definitely an autistic type, and I was never diagnosed as autistic when I was young, because it wasn't so much a thing that happened back then, but I'm definitely on the autistic spectrum somewhere. And I tend to imbue inanimate objects with a life of their own in my head. So, when a mechanical thing is broken and I can see it needs to be fixed, I feel sorry for it. I do genuinely have an emotional reaction to it, and think that's just not right. I can fix that. I can make that better, and I will. I feel like I've done something worthwhile by fixing a broken device, and making it work again. And some people will look at me with a kind of like, okay, he's a bit weird, and other people go, yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. And it's impossible to explain why I think that it's a good thing. I've helped that object out, and I don't know. So, and I try and get that into my story. So so the Mobilus ship, for example, it keeps breaking down. There's something wrong with it. It's not properly working. It's got leaks. It's not a perfect device, but it is a character in the story of Shadeward, deliberately. Okay. I think I'm just a gearhead. I'm a certified Bob. Yeah, so that sort of thing. So and when one of my cars isn't working properly, clearly it needs some TLC. Something needs to be done. So things like that. I do get an emotional response to inanimate objects, and I can't really explain it other than that must be the way I'm wired in a sort of so the Mobilus ship is a character, and in Elite Reclamation you'll notice also there's a ship in Elite Reclamation, the Bella Principessa, which is Luco's Cobra Mark III, and I deliberately made it. Basically, it's a classic car in the universe of Elite Dangerous, is what it is. Okay, so it's old, but it's worthy. Okay, it's done things in its life. It's not perfect. It's been patched up. It's been sat in a dark cavern for a decade or so, but it's still got it when it counts. It's a character. Okay, and the Bella Principessa in Elite Reclamation is effectively an old classic Cobra Mark III, and even down to the description where Luco says he doesn't. I don't have any of those holofac things that you have on all the modern ships. No, proper original old dials. So you've got to imagine a Cobra Mark III with a sort of vintage Jaguar dashboard. That's how I was trying to get it to look. Okay, so none of this holofac imagery. No, it's all old school readouts. And it's designed to be a ship that is effectively a classic car, and that's how I basically designed Luco in that sense. He's a classic car owner in the universe of Elite Dangerous. So instead of a classic car, he has a classic ship, and it's old school. So it doesn't have a sat nav. It doesn't have anti-lock brakes. It doesn't have power steering. It's an old school ship, and it has old school charm to it. But of course, it doesn't work brilliantly. So it becomes a character, yeah, Drew grew up watching that. Yeah, so all those things, yes, maybe it is. And I do love all those old shows. So if you think about Knight Rider, you've got a semi-intelligent car, an artificially intelligent car. Airwolf had a helicopter that had special capabilities. Blue Thunder had a helicopter that had special capabilities. The Dukes of Hazzard had a car that could jump over things. Even in Battlestar Galactica, you have the Battlestar Galactica. It's a ship that is their home and their refuge between episodes, and also takes a massive pounding from the Cylons, but keeps going. So it has that, and I always feel an affinity for old technology that still works. So you may have seen me tweet occasionally. I've got. In fact, I've been given custodianship, should I say, of a some really old audio gear from the 70s. So I have this reel-to-reel tape player and a vintage vinyl record player, cassettes and all sorts of things like that. And I've recently got my cassette player in my old Golf GTI working again from the 1980s. And I like to get it working and working well because I feel it should. And I'm kind of like, when a piece of technology from that is that old works, I feel a great sense of, I don't know, like I've brought it back to life. I've sort of reincarnated it and given it another chance to be good at what it was doing. When a piece of machinery is doing what it was designed to do, in a way that it was designed to do it, in the manner of which it was designed, and it still works many, many, many years later, I feel a great sense of rightness. Which is about the only way I could describe it. And I try and get that into the stories, okay? So the Mobilus in particular, and Luco's Cobra Mark III, the Bella Principessa, has that essence of an old piece of technology which is still doing its thing, and well done. It's still good. And we like an object with where is history and history character. Yeah, it's that. This is a worthy piece of equipment. It's done stuff, and I completely get why captains of ships will could go down with a ship. Like, I get that. So you have a situation where in a war or World War II or something like that, where the captain goes down with a ship. I get that. And it may sound very odd. Why would you go down with a ship? But I completely get why a captain would go down with a ship, because this is his command. Okay, this ship has done its best to protect the lives of everybody aboard. I know it's just an inanimate object, but it isn't just an inanimate object. It's more than that. So those things are very interesting. And having and my Amiga still works. So old computer day. I've still got my Spectrum over there on the shelf, and it has pride of place now, because it's like that's my first computer. It works. It's still doing its thing. All those kind of things, and I'd like to build that into the story. So I think having a sense of attachment to the things that are in your story is important. So in Shadeward, I made sure that you were very familiar with the ship. You knew how it worked. You knew which rooms it had, end to end. You knew it had two engines, and one was always breaking down. You knew how the mechanisms work. You knew the crew on board the ship and their relationship with the ship. All those sort of things. And you also got close to the characters. You knew, for example, that Kiri, she gets very, very badly injured at the beginning at the end of book one, and she always then wears a glove on her hand to hide the scar and the injury that she suffered, because she doesn't want it to be shown. So she has a black glove, and the black glove becomes a distinguishing feature of Kiri throughout the, it's like an element of doom. There's this girl with a black glove in my dreams. That's a bad thing. And then there's a very poignant moment where basically Maru says, look, there is technology that can fix your hand. We could do that for you. And Kiri basically says, no, it's part of me. It's part of who I am. I don't want it to be fixed. I live with it because it reminds me of what happened. And those little things add up to make your character that little bit more kind of, that's Kiri. She's unmistakable because, yes, she's the girl with the maimed hand. And things like that. Give your characters that little bit more connection with you, the reader. I think that's how I do it anyway. Serenity is another great example. Okay, so Serenity is home in the Firefly series. So it's a ship that is pretty knackered. It's old. bits keep falling off. But it's home, it is home. You come back to it, and it's a place of refuge, and it's a ship that can take you to other places. It's a source of adventure. It's more than just a machine. And I think, if you can get that essence of those sort of things into your story as well, that helps. So, Luco's Cobra is not just another Cobra. It's Luco's Cobra. It's the Bella Principessa. It's a classic Cobra. The Mobilis isn't just a ship. It's a special ship. It's the last remaining survivor of a technology that has long since been lost, and it's the only one left in the entire world. And yes, in its prime, it was just an ordinary, simple, small vessel, probably just a tug or something like that for much, much grander ships. But they've all gone, and the Mobilis is the only thing left. It's the only piece of high technology of that type of ship left in the world, and so it's special by that thing, even though it has very humdrum origins. And it's things like that. You kind of like, oh yeah, I get that. Okay, so the Mobilis is, it's super advanced now, but when it was new, it wasn't. It was just another average thing, but it becomes special because it's the only one left. It's exactly like Battlestar Galactica, and that is good writing, I think. So Battlestar Galactica is a really good one. The Battlestar Galactica, particularly in the reimagined series, is not the best Battlestar. Not it's half of it's been turned into a gift shop, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. Here's the last Battlestar Galactica, and actually at the beginning of the show it's why can't we use the left-hand pod? It's a gift shop. I just thought that was brilliant writing. You could just see the commander going, yeah, that's really, really good. And the ship is a museum piece, but because it's a museum piece, that's what saves it. And so having the vessel or the ship or the car or whatever the mechanical thing is in the story being a bit of an underdog, and not perfect, not OP, not able to outrun everything in the universe or be the fastest accelerating thing. Actually having it not being that makes it more memorable for readers of the story. Reminds me of an old resistance fighter in Deep Space Nine. He fought alongside Kira Nerys, and they were once in the tough spot, and he prayed to the Prophet they get out of there. They did get out of there, but he lost an arm, and I think they said he could get it fixed, but he said it was always feel as if he was ungrateful for getting away with his life. So that's exactly the ruse I used for Kiri. And actually that was a fan's suggestion. I hadn't originally come up with the idea, and I thought, and somebody said when they were reading the original draft, they said, wouldn't Maru offer to fix that? Because he knows she's in pain, he knows she can't use her hand properly, and I thought, yes, he probably would. That's exactly the sort of thing that Maru would do. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to go, okay, well, how's Kiri going to respond to that? Is she going to go, yes, actually, I want to be free from the pain, or is she going to go, no, it's part of who I am, and it helped, and every time I feel the pain, I remember this important person in her past who died as a result of that particular situation. And actually I thought it'll be more poignant if Kiri basically says, no, I don't want it fixed because I want to remember what happened. And that, I think, adds depth to your character. It adds depth to your character. So those are the sort of things, I suppose. And I suppose from a pure writing perspective, I start with the characters and go, okay, and I do. it's quite. There's probably something very wrong with my psyche. I go, okay, let's have a character who does this. Let's have a character who does that. Let's have a character who does that. Da 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 da. What nasty things can I make happen to them? So, in order to be honest with Shadeward, in order to give you some sympathy for Kiri, particularly early on, I wanted you to be sympathetic to Kiri for book one. I laid it on fairly hard that Kiri had a bad life. Okay, so she gets beaten up right at the beginning of the story. She gets almost threatened with death, kind of in the middle of the story, and then at the end of Shadeward book one, a nasty thing happens to her again. And the idea being there that you hopefully at the end of the book you're kind of going, actually this poor girl I want to see what happens, because surely things can only get better. And I wanted you to have a level of sympathy for her, because of course she goes on in the later books to do some very, very nasty, terrible things. But you are kind of in that quandary that you're rooting for this girl, and yet she turns out and does some very, very unpleasant things, and you're kind of going, actually, hang on, this is the one I was rooting for, and now she's doing these awful, awful things. And I don't agree with what she's doing, but I completely get why she's doing it. And I was deliberately trying to put in your head as a reader, I like her and I hate her, I love her and I hate her, and why is she? I know why she's doing that, but I don't want her to do that. Those are the sort of things I was trying to get you to experience as a reader, in those sort of character developments, and that's what I was aiming for. Is you tell me if I managed to succeed, but that's because I'm a character writer, okay. And that won't necessarily be the case for everybody. As a lot of people can know, I want to have action scenes where things explode and things happen, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to. You don't have to do what I do. That's not the only way to do things. That just happens to be the sort of way I do things. And so, if you get a Dru-ids book, you're going to have, you're going to have character style interactions. To a greater or lesser extent, and that's and Salome was designed to be the same way. Salome was designed to be a character. As you start out, you think, who is this bitch? She is awful, and I was deliberately trying to make you dislike her early on as much as possible. Within the confines of being reasonable. I wanted you to go, she's just stuck up, she's arrogant, she's rude. She needs a good slapping. And of course, she gets such a good slapping, she actually gets killed and then has to get resurrected. Loses her memory, loses her prestige and her rank. And then you're kind of in a situation, okay, well, I hated this character. But now she's had a run of really, really bad luck, and she's sort of seen the light a bit. So I've got a bit more sympathy for her. And so, again, in Elite Reclamation, I was trying to make you go through a process of, am I rooting for her or not? That sort of thing. And so that was my kind of aim with those sort of characters, and trying to have a bit of fun with them. So that's the way I do it. But I do plot very, 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 very detailed from end to end. I really do, because I find if I have situations where, okay, if I want that to happen and I want that to happen and I want that to happen, I need to have a path to get between them that kind of makes sense, and then somebody doesn't just go, you know what, today I'm going to do this, because if I don't, then that next scene can't happen. And I really hate that in movies. You have that so often in particularly in films, I find, and it's beautifully lampooned in the pitch meeting videos. I love watching those. Those are absolutely 100% up my street. Whereby he just comes up with his catchphrase and says, "So how's that going to happen? Isn't that going to be really, really difficult?" No, it's going to be super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Really, and it's just really, really, really good. You just kind of go, yeah. You're just writing that because, and I hate that, and I won't allow that to be in my story. So I do agonise about it quite a bit, and sometimes I have to walk away from the keyboard going, I don't have a solution to this problem, and I get quite annoyed, and sometimes I just don't make any progress at all. So I can have a day where I get 7,000 words written and it's like, this is awesome. And I can have a day where I get nothing done at all because I can't figure out how to write it in a sense that it satisfies me that it makes sense. And isn't kind of like, oh yes, well, he's just had some strange revelation. I know where the answer is. That's not good enough for me. I can't do that. Masterfully achieved. Oh, thank you very much for that. And Samaya says definitely works. I'm glad you enjoyed those characters. I tried to make characters that are memorable, and that people had an emotional attachment to. And I actually not really spoilers for book 4, but I haven't had anybody yet who's basically given me a review of book 4 of Shadeward who said they didn't end up in tears at some point in the story. So and different parts of the story, interesting enough, depending on what either character or situation you found yourself resonating with most. But it's and it was written to draw an emotional reaction. It was, because it's themes of sisterhood and betrayal and love and hate and revenge and all those sort of things are human nature, and deliberately wrapped up to try and provoke you into an emotional response. So sorry about that. That just happens. So you're telling me I shouldn't listen at work? Well, it depends what else is going on. I wouldn't necessarily operate any heavy machinery, let's put it that way. G-Edge says, I'm still undecided if I like Salome or not, and that's by design. Okay, I wanted, there was a very big thing early on, with and David Braben actually mentioned it, and I kind of agree with him. Is Elite Dangerous and Elite has never been about. He said, I don't like plots where you have to rescue the princess, and I kind of get that. So I came up with a plot where the princess, and she's not really a princess, she's a lady of the Empire, basically doesn't need rescuing. In fact, she goes out of her way to avoid being rescued, and she does some of the rescuing herself. And then she just goes around and shoots people and kills them and executes them and does. It's not a rescue the princess story at all. Kahina is no princess, and she knows her own mind. I like Salome, but I don't like Kahina. Now that's the interesting thing, is that they're obviously the same person, but with different perceptions. And it is like two sides of the same coin. So Kahina is the version of herself who is stuck inside the imperial hierarchy. She is nothing more, as far as her father is concerned, than marriage material to cement a diplomatic bond. That's what her purpose is. Her father had her born so that she could be marriage material to further his own political ends. That's what her purpose is in his eyes. And Kahina is intelligent and doesn't like this. And so she's always looking for a way out. But then, events get beyond her. But of course, in Elite Reclamation, she loses her memory of who she actually is, and ends up stuck alongside the average commanders like us of the Elite universe, and experiences a completely different way of life to the life that she was. And then when her memory does eventually return, she has to reconcile the Kahina-ness and the Salome-ness of her two sides and decide what to do about it. And actually, to start with, the Kahina-ness is the stronger part of it, and she basically kicks off a war. And then she gets a chance to reflect afterwards as to, actually, was that the right thing to do? And Luco is basically saying, no, you've got to be true to yourself. Who's the real you? Is it Kahina or is it Salome? Which one of those people is the real you? Strip away everything else. Which one's the real one? And that's basically how Reclamation ends. And it's supposed to be that kind of exploration of, okay, so if you're one person because of the society you're in, if you're taken out of that society and given a clean sheet, who are you? And that's kind of the message, I suppose, behind Elite Reclamation, really, other than being a good, hopefully, Elite Dangerous sci-fi story. So that's that's kind of what I was attempting to. That's the subtext. For those of you who are doing GCSE English analysis and you choose Elite Reclamation as a topic, that's the answer. Okay, that's the subtext of the book. So Chris says, actually, I haven't gone through the books yet. I'm waiting for the final one to come out on Audible, and then we'll binge. Okay, so yes, I'll get the last Shadeward on Audible out for you. And there's lots of stories that use sort of similar ideas to that. It's not an uncommon technique, but it's a technique I found quite compelling and I enjoy doing. So I suppose that's quite a good thing. So those sort of things. So that's. That's kind of what I do, I suppose. So that's totally derailed the stream, which is excellent. So thank you for the question, actually, right up front. That was quite good. But you can put a lot of that into a story. Your characters. And the other thing that somebody did say once to me is that I feel quite alarmed, Drew, because I get attached to the characters that you write. Even some of the he says, and that you have an annoying habit of making even the secondary characters people that I'm interested in, and then you kill them off. So no, I wanted to find out more about X, Y, Z. I try and make sure each character has, even the ones that don't show up for very long, have some distinguishing features that you kind of go, yes, I can kind of get a feel for them. Try and make your characters distinct from each other is definitely good advice, I would say. So one of the things I did have fun with Reclamation is I've got these two politicians from the Empire early on, and one is deliberately fat and one is deliberately thin, and that's just a way for you to distinguish them in your eyes to start with. And they're really pompous and arrogant, and they're sort of a pair of twins, who kind of argue with each other but actually like each other a lot, and they kind of sit together very well. And then there's another pairing in Elite Reclamation, which is the Federal Ambassador and the Imperial Ambassador, and these two basically have to be incredibly polite to each other at all times. But of course, what they're actually doing is they're vying for position and power and prestige, and manoeuvring against each other for years upon end. And so they know each other very well, and they know they're both clever and they're both intelligent, and they're always in a game of one-upmanship against each other. But it has to be extremely polite at all times. So even when they're insulting each other and they're trying to get, they're effectively at war with each other, they're still being desperately polite and not trying to offend each other. And that's those connections between people are very, very important, I think, for story. So the ambassador, those two, Geren and Zaire, I think they were called, are kind of Laurel and Hardy, in that sense. They have that sort of vibe to them, and the two Imperials reminded me of the Pharaoh's magic wielding of eyes. It's that sort of feel, yes. So those things are very powerful mechanisms. Okay, so if you can have character pairings that make sense and work together in the script, so that these guys don't necessarily like each other, but they hang out with each other because they're familiar with each other, and they would be lost if they didn't have each other. Doesn't mean they have to get on all the time. And then so I deliberately made Geren. He's a big guy, but he's very chill, and he goes, well, whatever will be, my friend. You must just go with the flow. These things will all resolve themselves in time. It'll be okay. And then you kind of got the other guy who's thin and he's really nervous. Wait, this might go wrong. And if that goes wrong, then this thing will go wrong. And if that goes wrong, then that thing will go wrong. And it's going to be a complete disaster. Everything's going to go wrong. And that's how he is. Okay, he's really stressed all of the time. And so you can use these two characters to say, well, of course, look, Kahina's gone and done that, isn't that? Well, that's quite interesting. What do you mean it's interesting? It's a complete disaster. And that's how you can kind of keep the characters kind of flowing on. All that sort of thing. What made you make Princess Aisling into a spoilt brat? Well, actually, I had. That comes from Frontier, believe it or not. I sat down with Michael Brooks a long time ago now, and I said, basically, is there anything on these power play characters that I can kind of use to flesh them out a bit? Because I said I wanted to have the power play characters, at least some of them, in Premonition. And I thought, if I'm going to write some power play characters, I need to, what are they like really? Because all you get in Elite Dangerous, obviously, is a picture of them and an occasional Galnet article. That was all that there was visible. Now, I kind of thought, in my naivety, that they would have written something like I do, with this is a character breakdown, and this is what they look like, and this is where they came from, and da-da-da. No, there wasn't anything like that at all. It was Michael Brooks said, no, there isn't anything like that. They're just these pictures. You do what you like. Okay. So I said, tell you what I'll do, can I write up some bios for, I want to use 3 of them. I think I used Hudson, Patrius and Aisling primarily. Oh, and I used Mahon as well. And so I wrote up some character bios for them, basically what they like, what their mannerisms like, and I sent them back to Michael Brooks and said, is this okay? Because this is kind of how I see them. And he basically came back and he said, yep, no, they look really, really good. He says, yes, Aisling is exactly how I saw her. So I was like, that was kind of a thumbs up. So yeah, Aisling basically is a spoiled brat because Michael Brooks said it was okay. And I kind of want, Patrius comes across as a bit of a, an aggressive kind of idiot. in Elite Dangerous, and I was thinking, he's the Fleet Admiral. He can't be dumb. Okay, surely he can't be dumb as the Fleet Admiral unless he's a figurehead. So I thought, I've already painted Aisling as a bit of an airhead figurehead. I can't have Patrius as a figurehead as well. So I actually tried to paint Patrius as a very smart guy who's making difficult choices, but has to play a bumbling buffoon in public in order to further his ends and those of the other people he works for. So that's how I painted Patrius. He's actually a really smart, clever guy, but he has to play the idiot in the public sphere for reasons of what the story was doing at the time. Oh, and Arissa's in there as well, and she's basically really smart, but gets other people to do her dirty work, so she steps back from things and lets other people take the blame. And then Mahon, I think I basically said, he's again another very cagey guy who, is very adept at politics and can sidestep things and get other people to do things on his behalf, so he can continue to portray the image he wants to portray. So it was all very kind of politically schemy sort of stuff. That's how I put the characters together and said to Michael Brooks, who was in charge of the law at the time I wrote that story, is that okay? Is that how you sort of see it working? And he kind of gave me, yep, that's absolutely fine. But I don't know if they kind of followed on with that ever since. So that's how I wrote them then. So it's it's a moment in time, I suppose, premonition as to what those characters are like. But of course, I had all of the player characters as well to implement into that book as well. So one of the scenes I'm most proud of actually in Elite Premonition is what I call the Council of Eremus. Which is kind of Council of Elrond stuff. It's basically a bunch of the community I get to meet. I can't remember exactly where. It's one of the space stations, I think. And you have all the different factions that were prominent in the game at the time, brought together under a sort of flag of truce to say, what are we doing about this situation? And in the story, Eremus, Commander Eremus, is a real player, has to basically try and get all these disparate factions with different agendas onto the same side to confront the Federation, to support Salome so they can find out what the hell's going on. And so there's this Council of Eremus where basically he has the task. He goes into this meeting thinking, how the hell am I going to persuade all these people onto my side, because they've all got different agendas. And I start off the meeting by it's all going really, really badly wrong because this person says, yes, but we are more important than you, and if I don't agree, then these guys over here aren't going to agree. Convince me, Mr. Eremus, that we should support you. It's all kind of very confrontational. But that scene is one of the kind of core heart points of the book that I had a lot of fun writing. And Eremus actually contacted me after because I said, this is what I'm planning to do, because I know you guys actually had conversations like this, out of game in the meta of these things, of the events at the time. But I'm going to have to write it in game, in context, to make it make sense, because I can't have meta stuff in the book because it doesn't exist. It has to be in game. And I said, I'm going to write it like this. You are in a conference room on a space station trying to convince people to join your side. And he said, no, that sounds great. And I said, what I'll do is I'll let you read the draft once I finish the scene and see what you think. And I sent it across to him, and he basically sent me an email back a few days later saying, he says it's amazing. It's like you were there. That's exactly what happened. It just, we weren't on a space station. I thought, yes, I'm there on it. It's really good. Jill, I think it says you had to change his commander name for the book because it wasn't suitable. Yes, changed to Josh Hill. Those sort of things are really good. It's nice to have included real commanders in there. So yes, there was and Premonition I must admit, it's a book I haven't wanted to go back and read myself since I wrote it. I haven't read it since I finished it because I'm a bit worried it won't be as good as I hope it will be, because it was a compromise of different ways of writing stories. It's not something I think I would do again, because it was too complicated to be the best story it could possibly be, because I had to follow events in a computer game which was not as well structured as a plot would normally be, if you see what I mean. Because weird stuff happens in computer games and you have to take into account for it. So it was a bit of a challenge to kind of draw it all together. Interesting project, but not something I necessarily think I'd like to try again. trying to write a book that follows actual events in a computer game. I think maybe that was a bit ambitious. So I'm a bit wary of going back to read it. And I haven't read it myself since, because I'm a bit nervous of it. So those sort of things. But so for me, the character development is the key thing. And I tried to do that with the power play characters. I was a bit shocked when they said there wasn't any. So I thought, I'm going to need some to write a story about them and kind of bring them in. And that's why the power play characters in Premonition are the way they are. Not a structured computer game. What game was that? Those sort of things. Dru, you should. It's really good, and it got what we got into writing in the first place. Read it twice, spot on for limitations. So yes, it was. To me, it's. I'm proud that I did it, and I had a lot of community support, and I'm glad I was able to introduce a lot of community stuff into the book and tell a story that kind of made sense. It's not as good in my head to the work I did with Shadeward, but it's probably more popular because Elite Dangerous, right? But it's not a book I would put at the top of my list of things that I think are the best things I've done. I think I would put Shadeward 4 at the top of that list at the moment, because I just think it's the book that, if you wanted to know what's important to Dru Wager, when I've snuffed it and I've gone with my mortal coil and this is all history, if you want to know what Dru Wager is about, Shadeward 4 is your answer. I would say, if you want to get to the core of what I think is important about stuff, Shadeward 4 will tell you. So that's my recommendation. For those of you who haven't read Shadeward 4 yet, then you can do that at your leisure. So that's quite good fun. But yeah, so to bring it round to a conclusion, then I'm a character author, okay, and it's the characters that interest me in the stories, not so much the scenery. I like doing the scenery, but it's not as important as the characters. Read it twice, spot on for the limitations given. Oh, thank you, Liam. Will Shadeward be available for a complete box set? I'll have to have a look at that. I mean, Shadeward is actually finished in a sense of the actual physical books, so I ought to have a think about a box set, actually. I haven't finished the Audible yet. I'm about 2/3 of the way through that now, so... there's bonbons in Shadeward. Yeah, see what you did there. Well, oddly enough, some of the things I value the most, I suppose, quiet times or sitting round chewing the fat with friends or family. There are moments of that in Shadeward. But, some of the bigger themes are the things I think are important as well in there. So yeah, you'll find out. If you read Shadeward 4, you'll know quite a lot about me, I suppose. And any book will reveal quite a lot about the person who's written it, I'm sure. Was Reclamation easier to write than Premonition? I would think it was, actually. Reclamation was one of those stories that came to me very, very quickly. So, I mean, I had the opportunity, obviously, at the end of the Kickstarter for Elite Dangerous, I ended up in a situation where suddenly I was like, I've got permission to write the book that I've always wanted to write, an adventure in what was the Elite universe, now Elite Dangerous universe. And I knew the Cobra Mark III, I knew the Viper and the Asp and the Anaconda and the star systems and the way everything worked, and I thought I'm really in the zone here to be able to write an Elite book. I know my stuff here. I know all about this universe. And yes, quite a lot of stuff was changed and added, obviously, in Elite Dangerous over the other games, but I knew it well. I felt very, very comfortable, and I felt I'd got a handle on the kind of slightly anarchic, grimy, high-tech but low morals universe of Elite. I felt I'd got that vibe quite well, and so I tried to imbue Elite Reclamation with that vibe. But the plot came to me quite quickly. David Braben's "I don't want any rescuing the princess" stories was sort of echoing in my head a bit, and I thought, no, but I kind of want a princessy type character. And Keena's not really a princess at all, but I kind of wanted a very notable leading lady in the story, to kind of drive that plot forward. And it came to me very quickly. Although, interesting enough, if you look at one of the early drafts of Elite Reclamation, Hassan and Salome are actually the other way around. So Hassan is the high-ranking Imperial, and Kahina is actually the owner of the Eagle starship. So she's the sort of trader fighter person, and Hassan is the posh, a rich kid basically. And I can't actually remember now what caused me to swap those two around, but something did. I remember thinking it just works better if Kahina is the sport rich kid and Hassan is the owner of the ship. And I can't remember what it was that flipped it, but it wasn't that way round in the original early draft of the story. And then by the time I was halfway through the story, it had flipped around, so Kahina was the spoiled brat and Hassan was flying the ship. And it kind of went from there. But Reclamation was definitely easier to write because I kind of had the idea of, okay, person in high place gets taken down to low place, finds himself, and then comes to terms with things, all the while being shot to pieces by spaceships and shields and missiles and stuff and space stations. That plot came together quite quickly. And I just wanted to introduce, the other things that I was very keen of, you'll notice if you know your Elite lore, in Elite Reclamation there is a scene in there which is specifically derivative of the original Dark Wheel book by Robert Holdstock. So there's an absolute homage, virtually word for word, and I did that deliberately for Robert Holdstock. So there was a sort of handover between the Dark Wheel book and Elite Reclamation. And there are quite a few nods to the original game. There are nods to Frontier Elite 2 and Frontier First Encounters in Elite Reclamation, and they were put in there deliberately so that the old fans of the old games would read that book and go, aha, yes, I see what he's done. So there's quite a few of those. So if you hadn't played those games at the time you read Elite Reclamation, and you've seen any of my retro streams since, if you go back and read Elite Reclamation now, a few of those things will probably jump out of you and go, that's the thing on the third game or the second game or something like that. Those things will jump out at you as kind of like, oh yes. And I'd put a lot of that sort of stuff in to give the original fans of the games a comfortable feeling that they were being taken from the old worlds of Elite and Frontier into the kind of new generation of Elite Dangerous. That was another narrative construct I used in Reclamation. So not only have you got the story of Kahina Salome going high, then low, then high, and Hassan finding his way through, and an evil baddie that has to be dealt with, and Dog's rather confusing set of personalities. You've got all those different arcs that intertwine. You've also got this kind of meta narrative in Elite Reclamation, which is, guys, I know you played the original Elite, and guys, I remember you played the original Frontier. This story is for you because of this bit, and come on guys, it's now time to play Elite Dangerous. Those are all little subtext that were in that book as well. So there you go. I like to weave things into that. And for those, there's one last thing I will mention, which is a little thing that I've pinched from Clive Cussler, actually. For those of you who, and I don't really like Clive Cussler books, to be honest, but I have read a few of them, and there's one thing that he does which I thought, I'm going to pinch that. Clive Cussler always puts a cameo of himself into his books. So I don't know if you've spotted this. He's got various different heroes in his stories. And Dirk, what's his name? Dirk, can't remember the surname. Dirk something. Is one of the main characters. But the protagonist of Clive Cussler's novels always meets an odd figure at some point during the story. He generally owns some kind of classic car. Dirk Pitt, there we are, Dirk Pitt. And he always meets some kind of guy, either at a restaurant or at some event, who he never names, okay? And he always bumps into this guy and they have a short conversation, and Dirk Pitt just usually says something to the effect of, he seems really familiar, but never names him. And of course it's Clive Cussler himself inside the story. Now I will admit to a moment of weakness in Elite Reclamation. You've probably spotted it. So in Elite Reclamation, I am in the story somewhere. Okay, if you don't know where it is, you're going to have to reread it now because I'm not going to tell you. But I am actually in the story, and I do get to meet Kahina briefly, okay, at one point. But that's the only time I've done that. Okay, I'm not in any of my other stories. The one thing I do have, though, there is a commonality in all of my stories. There's this little device that's in a sort of parallel universe of Druidism, which you may have noticed as well. Did I die? No, I didn't. I wasn't wearing a hat, as far as I recall. No, there is a scene in Elite Reclamation where I bump into Kahina very, very briefly, and that's it. Was I wearing a hat? No, I don't think I was wearing my hat. No, not in there. So I wasn't the space cowboy at that point. But no, so I don't appear in any of my other books. I try not to be that vain. I couldn't resist it, I'm afraid, with Elite Reclamation. So I kind of caved into my own peer pressure there. But in all my other books, I don't appear in my other books. But there is one thing which is common to all of my books. There's a device that's in every single book, and it's a clock. It's a clock that I happen to own. And it was given to me by my great uncle, and it actually comes off a World War II destroyer. So it's a marine clock, and I have it on the wall. It's an unusual marine clock in the sense it's a 24-hour clock. Okay, and that clock, that timepiece, appears in every single novel that I've ever written, and will appear in every single novel I've written. Okay, so it appears in Shadeward. It appears in, I'm just trying to remember which book it's in. It doesn't appear in all four of them because it only appears in one place in each area. But it appears, where is it? It appears in book 2 in Shadeward. It appears in Elite Reclamation. It also appears in Lords of Midnight as well, which was a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out how to get an antique clock into a fantasy novel, but I did manage it. So it's a kind of multiverse timepiece that appears in all of my fictional stuff. So keep an eye out for the clock. Okay, there's a clock in all of my books, and it's the same one. and it serves a little purpose in each book. It's a small one, but you'll spot it in Elite Reclamation, you'll spot it in Shadeward, and you'll spot it in Lords of Midnight. So there we go. Wearing black cowboy hat on that side of Remnant Helmet. Oh yes, I'm in another story you said concerning some mugs. So yes. And I can't claim any credit for the mug story at all. Back in the ancient mists of time at the beginning of Elite Dangerous, you know this thing with For the Mug, okay, which you've probably heard, and Hutton Orbital Truckers and Hutton Orbital itself. They have mugs, okay, and you can get a mug from Hutton Orbital in Elite Dangerous. Well, I didn't create this, but I was involved in its genesis. In the sense that there was an episode of Dockers, which is a very, very irreverent, I think that's the safest thing I can say about it, a very, very irreverent take on Elite Dangerous. And years ago, as not far from when it began, Senator Wager was a character in Dockers, and I think I ended up getting killed in the end. And David Brubin was another character in Dockers, which I assume is probably still alive and still going. And David Brubin was with the Federation, and Senator Wager, not surprisingly, was with the Empire. And they actually effectively had a war. And the weapons of choice were from David Brubin of the Federation were mugs. Okay, so mugs were ammunition that were being chucked at me. And I was responding by chucking slaves in return. But because I ran out of slaves, I effectively lost the war, and the mugs won. So I'm pretty sure that's the origin of the phrase "for the mug." So it's kind of like one of those things. But so mugs, hats, and clocks, and a very, very, very small cameo for me in Elite Reclamation. Little nods to immortality, I suppose. Was I wearing tight pants? No, I wasn't. Dru-ids Rebecca. No, actually, was I in? Yes, I was in Escape Velocity. I had a very small cameo in Escape Velocity as well. I can't remember who I was now. Many mugs were lost in the making of that story. They were indeed. In fact, there was an episode. There was a LaveCon, possibly either the first one or the second one. We actually had a situation where loads of mugs were actually being thrown and being smashed up, and the people organising it got into trouble because they were raiding charity shops for mugs. So I think that was quite funny, but I can't remember exactly what the details were. That's too long ago. So little bits and pieces of that. Does the clock appear in Torn? Yes, it does. Yes, it appears in Torn as well. In fact, and will it appear in Doomdarks? It probably won't appear in Doomdarks because it exists in a place in Lords of Midnight. So it's physically in a locale in Lords of Midnight, which doesn't happen in Doomdarks Revenge, but it's still there in that universe. So if they ever go back to that locale, they'll be able to see it again. So the clock doesn't move within the locale of where it exists in that series, if you like. So it only appears in Shadeward 2 because the characters only go to that locale once in that particular in that series. So, but that's just a little signature thing that I do. So that's kind of a thing. Dru is Rebecca. So yeah, Rebecca was another character. Rebecca isn't nearly as well drawn as some of the later characters I do, but she was one of the first characters I thought, let's have a disaffected person as an interesting lead character. So Rebecca is a character that I penned back in 2003 or 2005 or something like that. And One Poor World, that's exactly it, GL 1988. And she was one of my first attempts to kind of draw a character who was not your classic protagonist. So Rebecca is in the Elite Dangerous universe, she's a very old lady with a lot of life experience, but when she originally was penned, she was a young adolescent daughter of a trader who'd kind of gone off the rails and basically dobbed her family in for money then regretted it later on. So again, one of my early attempts to write a slightly conflicted character who has some complexity to them. So that's kind of where Rebecca started. And Rebecca was named Rebecca after Daphne du Maurier's book Rebecca, because it happened to be my favourite book at the time. So there's always a connection to something that connects to something before that, and I like those sort of things. So you can always pull strings and find out where they go. But there we go. Anyway, my friends, it is. I've been waffling on for way too long, completely off topic for the entire stream. So congratulations. I think that is definitely a record. We should do this more often. Completely off topic rambling. So I do like sometimes having an idea, but if you guys want to go in a particular direction, that's okay with me. All right, no problem at all. So thank you very much for listening to me waffling on about mostly my stuff, actually, to be honest. And I'm glad you're interested in it, actually, and some of the structure behind it, because there is quite a lot of work that goes into it, which on the surface of it, it's just a book, but it's not just a book. It's quite a lot of creativity that goes on around the edges, not beyond just the physical thing of writing it, but the imagining and the kind of agonising about how things work and trying to plot things and all that sort of stuff is all of the essence that goes into a book, and it's quite a big thing when you add it all up. So. But there we go. But 2 hours of waffle, and tasty waffle too. Excellent. Thanks for the stream, Drew. That was a great diversion. Always welcome. So we can always do a bit more of the actual specific writing stuff, because I know a lot of you aspire to doing writing, and please do, because if you like writing, and writing is something that you want to do, it will never leave you alone until you do it. Okay, I can promise you that. You'll always be going, I need to find some time to do this. I need to find some time to do this. And it will nag you for the rest of your life. It's like a gypsy curse, okay? It's never going to go away. So until you scratch that itch, my friends, if you've got an inkling to write a book, you will always have it at the back of your head saying, just sit down and find some time to write that book. It just won't let you go. It doesn't let me go. I have to just tell stories because there's something in me that forces me to do it. Kind of really, really weird. So there we go. But anyway, you have a fantastic week ahead. Look after yourselves, okay? Particularly as the lockdown appears to now be easing in different places, which is great news, but just be careful. I'll be back on Thursday for some chuckles and laughs, I suppose, my observations of the Elite Dangerous Alpha, which are making me quite good fun. And yeah, happy to do off-topic stuff. It's absolutely fine. Let's see where these things go. Always good to have a chat. So Thursdays is just Elite Dangerous Alpha for the time being. I'm having a look at that. I'm just kind of looking at, I'm trying not to do it from the perspective that everybody else is doing it. Okay, so everybody else is kind of concentrating on the missions and concentrating on the graphics and the things that you can find, which is all good fun. I'm just trying to concentrate on it from the kind of, what's the feel here? What are we getting from this? Does it make sense? Does it hang together? What's the lore side? What's the potential for storytelling and these kind of things? And where's that all going? So that's kind of my perspective. Retribution hopefully will be coming back. I need to sit down and find some time to work with some of the content creators on my Discord to come up with season 2. Season 1 seemed to go down really well, so I'm really pleased with how that went. And it was a bit of a test, to be honest, to see whether the idea worked. So, Odyssey Alpha Lore Tour. Well, I mean, there will be things to go and investigate. I think a lore tour might be a good thing. And I should definitely see if I can find my doppelganger on Thursday, shouldn't I? Yeah. So if we've got maybe we can do a Q&A question on writing as well. I'm quite happy to do that because kicked off with a good question this evening. So good stuff. Well done. So anyway, have a fantastic week ahead. I will see you on Thursdays for a bit of Elite Dangerous Alphaing, and on Saturday, of course, we're doing the retro stream. I'm desperately trying to make some headway on Frontier First Encounters. The game is doing its best to stop me, as you've probably seen if you've watched any of the replays. So we should see how it goes. But take care, my friends. See you soon. Look after yourselves, and if you've got that writing bug, don't ignore it. Embrace it. Go for it. Have some fun. Take care, guys, and I will see you soon. Bye bye now.